Right after Putin's visit to Pyongyang, the United States made its entry.
While the world is looking at Ukraine, Taiwan, and the Middle East, there's another point of conflict that could trigger a brutal war involving Russia, the United States, Japan, and China. We are talking about North Korea, the peninsula's conflictive brother, which has been preparing for years in leaps and bounds for a fight with its southern neighbor and any country that dares to intervene. In this new video from Military Force, we propose to analyze the true power of that nation, how many alliances would be necessary to destroy it, and how likely it is that in a few years, the Korean War will become a global nightmare. Let's begin. Since the 1950s, the Korean peninsula has existed in a constant state of tension. In a territory similar to that of Great Britain, two warring states coexist that seek to destroy each other. On one side, the communist government of Kim Jong-un with Pyongyang as its political center. On the other, South Korea, one of the main allies of the United States and NATO in the region, with Seoul as its capital. Its northern neighbor has spent the last few years preparing for open combat, adding missiles, tanks, and all possible technology to its arsenal. The impediments to this are numerous, since it is an isolated country plagued by restrictions, but it has still managed to establish itself as a threat to the entire West. Perhaps the most worrying news for South Korea and its political partners in Washington is the relationship established between Russia and the government of Kim Jong-un during the war in Ukraine. Regarding the situation, these were the words of NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg after a visit by Putin to his Asian friend.
Putin's visits to North Korea demonstrates and confirms the very close alignment between Russia and authoritarian states like North Korea, but also China and Iran. And this also demonstrates that our security is not regional, it's global.
Throughout the conflict, the Kremlin has used up much of its missile reserve, so it has had to double its production efforts, as well as go out and buy new units. Faced with a world that tried to isolate Moscow, the simplest way out was to negotiate with other marginalized parties of international trade. That is where the North Korean administration came into play, offering a huge supply of short, medium, and long-range missiles in exchange for a monetary sum, but also for something much more important: technological and logistical assistance to complete its satellite program and other military detection devices. This will take North Korea's defensive and offensive capabilities to the next level, providing a much-needed upgrade to its systems that date back to the Cold War. As you can imagine, the prospect of a bellicose dictatorship having access to the latest technology and satellite material did not go down well in the West, but there is nothing NATO can do about it. It was a bipartisan negotiation between Moscow and Pyongyang, the result of the increasingly close relationship between the two governments. Russia's isolation since February 2022 has only strengthened these ties, leading to the transfer of weapons and other goods between the two countries, a process that finds its origins in a treaty signed in 2019. Let's listen to the forceful words of both leaders.
Подписанный сегодня договор о всеобъемлющем партнерстве предусматривает в том числе оказание взаимной помощи в случае агрессии против одного из участников этого документа.
조선민주주의 정부는 세계 전략적 안정과 균형을 유지하는 데서 강력한 러시아 연방이 맡고 있는 중요한 사명과 역할에 대해서 평가하며 자기 주권과 안전이 평등한동을 수호하기 위해 우크라이나에서의 주권자 달성을 수행하고 있는 러시아 정부와 현대화 인민의 투쟁에 전적인 지지와.
In the event of an offensive against Kim Jong-un's territory, his multiple military projects supervised by Russia could be of vital importance when it comes to defending against attacks from missile boats such as those possessed by Japan. In this context, this war hypothesis depends entirely on how advanced the North Korean satellite program is. It is estimated that the update process will be rapid since Russia intends to donate some complete units and logistically assist one of its main partners in the region. This means that each projectile launched can be identified from space to lead to an appropriate response. This does not mean that North Korea will become an insurmountable fortress, but in the immediate future, it will have the tools to defend itself against an invasion driven by its NATO enemies. The importance of Russia in this scheme of events is gigantic, since in the event of war, it will surely be a source of weapons and all kinds of platforms necessary to be able to resist the advance. Perhaps the most interesting piece that Moscow can contribute is its S-300, S-400, and S-500 surface-to-air missile defense systems. The three launchers were designed at different times, but they have complementary capabilities, allowing them to create a protective shield that can detect attacks of various types and respond with projectiles that fit the threat. We are talking about the most powerful defensive network on the planet, which can threaten even Uncle Sam's most modern aircraft such as the F-22 and F-35, although the result of the cross between these metal birds and the Russian system is a matter of debate. Meanwhile, the North Korean government continues to carry out tests. To manipulate such complex and powerful machinery as the S-400, Putin will have to make his country's soldiers available to North Korea to operate the launchers and instruct the North Korean elements in their multiple tasks. This implies direct participation by the Kremlin, very different from the strategy used by NATO during the invasion of Ukraine, in which they opted to support with materials and policies, but without the concrete presence of soldiers. The consequences of a head-on clash between powers such as Russia, Japan, and the United States on neutral soil such as North Korea could be devastating. First of all, if the American government were to try to destroy the power of Pyongyang, its primary tool would surely be the 7th Fleet, one of the 5 that make up the navy of that country, and by a wide margin, the most powerful of all. As a geopolitical consequence of the Second World War, this enormous body of ships has its main port in Yokosuka, Japan, so it is located just a few hours away from the potential North Korean enemy. The 7th Fleet currently has between 50 and 60 ships, 350 aircraft, and 60,000 members of the Navy and Marine Corps. It is an imposing unit that alone surpasses the forces of entire countries. Without a doubt, it will be the spearhead in the event of wanting to dominate Kim Jong-un. To this, we must add the interesting maritime power of Japan, which is not on par with the belligerent forces, but has aircraft carriers and a lot of technology in terms of detection and radars. In this scenario, North Korea's other great ally can come into play: Xi Jinping. Since 2023, China has had the largest naval fleet on the planet. This means that, in terms of the number of ships, the Asian giant is above the United States. Although Uncle Sam continues to be in first place in terms of tonnage, that is, the size of its units, Chinese naval growth has exceeded all records and expectations. Next, we will watch a propaganda video produced by the Beijing Army itself.
是航母编队的大脑中枢，将数百海里范围内的潜艇、舰艇和战机一起组网，转子成群，决胜四距之外，征途星辰大海。
Impressive, isn't it? In a couple of decades, it has managed to amass a total personnel of over 240,000 soldiers and a variety of vessels, including 3 aircraft carriers, 51 destroyers, 49 frigates, 70 corvettes, and more than 100 missile boats. Add to this the number of models still in development, as well as the mysterious pirate fleet that has been patrolling the waters of the South Korean Sea for years. These are thousands of fishing or privately owned boats, which actually operate for the Chinese government, carrying out sabotage and surveillance activities, which constitutes a network without parallel in Southeast Asia. In the event of a direct attack on the North Korean people, Beijing's response will not only be linked to its good relationship with the Kim Jong-un government, but to the future plans of the Chinese Communist Party. For that nation, territorial and maritime control of Asia is an absolute priority. Xi Jinping's dream is to give his country influence across the entire South China Sea, as well as in the more distant areas of the Pacific. He sees that region as China's playground, and it is up to him to exercise his power. Now, let's imagine for a second the level of devastation that could be unleashed in the Pacific if the navies of China and the United States clash. The outcome of such a confrontation is unpredictable, as it will depend on the alliances they can forge, the tactics of their leaders, and many unknown factors. All we can say is that Xi Jinping's fleet will be an immense challenge for Washington. On June 30th, 2024, North Korea raised its voice because of a series of military exercises carried out by its southern neighbor Japan and the United States, classifying that tripartite alliance as the NATO of Asia. North Korean authorities indicated that if these activities continue, the consequences could be fatal. Vladimir Putin also joined in with their demands at a rather confrontational conference.
We see what is happening in Asia. A bloc is forming. NATO is already moving to Asia as if to a permanent place of residence. This, of course, creates a threat to all countries in the region, including Russia. We are obliged to respond to this and will.
The exercises carried out between Japan, South Korea, and the United States involved the nuclear aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt, the Japanese guided missile destroyer JS Atago, and the South Korean-made KF-16 attack ships. Basically, a combination of the best of the military power of the three participants in a demonstration of destructive capabilities in Kim Jong-un's backyard. For many experts, it was nothing more than a provocation, since in the case of concrete activities, a model like the KF-16 would hardly be used above other units with known performances, such as Uncle Sam's F-16 or F-35. What really infuriated the North Korean government is that the tests were the product of a tripartite agreement signed in 2023, which provides for an increasingly stronger alliance between the countries, which threatens the growing influence of China in the region, one of Pyongyang's great allies. As usual, in the face of provocation from this alleged Asian NATO, the North Korean armed forces did not sit idly by. They took advantage of the situation to also demonstrate their power, and on July 1st, 2024, 2 ballistic missiles were launched from Hwanghae province. According to international media, one of the projectiles flew around 600 kilometers, while the other flew for about 120 kilometers. Evidently, they were models with different ranges, and they were fired only to warn that, in the event of hostilities, Kim Jong-un is ready to respond and press the red button that will take the conflict to the next level. The latter gives us a glimpse into the nuclear power of the North Korean nation and how it compares to that of its enemies. North Korea used to be a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but announced its withdrawal on January 10, 2003, which was made formal in April of the same year. They wasted no time as early as February 2005 claiming to have fully functional weapons of that type. However, the lack of concrete evidence led many experts to question that claim. Later in 2017, the Asian nation conducted exercises with a supposedly nuclear bomb. According to official media, the resulting explosion had a force, or yield, of between 100 and 370 kilotons. The same sources claim that the Hwasong-14 intercontinental ballistic missile, with even greater potential in a range of 8,000 kilometers, has also been tested. Some studies even suggest that it might be able to reach New York. Let's hope we never find out. The problem is that the North Korean program is a true mystery. The information that reaches the West is rumors, versions, and official presentations that are not always reliable. In comparison, it is well known that the United States has 3,700 nuclear warheads, which places it behind Russia, which reports almost 6,000. The consensus is that Kim Jong-un's soldiers probably have such weapons, but the quantity and effectiveness of them is unknown. Beyond these data, the greatest threat is the mystery surrounding their leader, who is considered capable of unleashing a brutal and apocalyptic war just to defend his tyrannical reign. The result of an attack on North Korea by NATO could be an immediate victory, but the real consequences would be seen over time when Russia and China find in that offensive the perfect excuse to respond. Only time will tell if at some point this apocalyptic scenario will become reality. In this way, we come to the end of a video full of dangers and nuclear threats. If you like this type of content where we hypothesize about conflicts, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications on our channel. That way you will be aware of every news. If nothing else, we say goodbye until the next installment of Military Force. Thank you for joining us.